Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm joined by Greg Cass from the Long Take Review to discuss the series Masters of the Air. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Thrilled to have Dr. Greg Cass back on the show to conclude our mini series on Lucasfilm adjacent World War II properties. And we are here at this juncture, the last one, to discuss the incredible TV series Masters of the Air, available now on Apple TV Plus. And full spoiler warning to everybody as we get into the nitty gritty of the entirety of all 9 episodes, plus hint at the companion documentary that is available on Apple TV Plus as well, that kind of talks about the real life history of the men of the 100th Bomb Group in the 8th Air Force during the Second World War. It's an incredible series, and I hope that you get a chance to check it out. And if not, hope this conversation perhaps sparks your interest in pursuing that or looking at some of the other properties that are connected to the Second World War, whether it be books, documentaries, other sources, you name it, museums, actually visiting the sites themselves. I think that would be awesome and a great way to move this conversation even forward. So that'll be on the other side of this break here, but we do have our Cloud City Gossip segment here, the appropriately dubbed portion of the show where we talk about some of the news and happenings that has taken place in the Star Wars and Lucasfilm adjacent galaxy over the last week here. And I did want to note that Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy Pieces of the Past, effectively a season 2 to rebuild the galaxy from last year, is now on Disney Plus. So go check that out because next week's episode we'll be talking about it. So you can be on the lookout for that in your podcast feeds very soon here. And if you don't want to be spoiled to anything, make sure you watch it beforehand. Also, I did want to additionally note that Andor, the fascinating and incredible and arguably timely TV series that has taken place and taken the world by storm, frankly, last April and May, won an additional Emmy Award at the live broadcast ceremony for outstanding writing for a drama series. So congrats to both Tony and Dan Gilroy on that matter for winning the award, particularly Dan Gilroy, who was up on stage to accept the award. And that brings Andor's total to 5 Emmy wins, which I know is a big accomplishment, something that Lucasfilm was really pushing for, especially with the For Your Consideration campaign, and the reason why Andor was very much in a packed release schedule in order to meet a certain deadline, so that it could be considered for this year's Emmys. And I hope that it may be because of that and recent events that people are really inspired to go check out the series again. I know a lot of podcasts are kind of taking their time with it or maybe doing a rewatch because of this kind of lull era in the Star Wars experience, if you will. So I think it's always a good time to keep Andor fresh and top of mind. So go check out Andor, go check out Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy Pieces of the Past, and of course, make sure you check out Masters of the Air if you have not yet, because on the other side of this break, we'll be back with Greg Cass to discuss Masters of the Air. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations, and I am so thrilled to be almost at technically it's the conclusion of our little mini series here that we've done in celebration of the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. And as I teased in last week's episode, Saving Private Ryan, which I hope you all checked out, we are here to chat about a long form series, all 9 episodes, plus a documentary, technically, if you want to include that into the mix as well. We're talking Masters of the Air, the incredible series that is now on Apple TV Plus. It's been on Apple TV Plus for over a year now, so you've had a lot of time to watch it now, folks. But Dr. Greg Cast is back on the show from fresh off of the Schindler's List episode 2 weeks ago, and now to chat about the Air War instead. Greg, welcome back to the podcast, and how are you doing?
Oh, I'm great, and thank you for having me back on. This had been on my list of things to watch eventually, and things I never know what to pick, and so you giving me the excuse to bump it up, it was wonderful. And I will tease that over on Long Take Review, we did Casablanca this week with
Ah.
a guest for our LTR guest list. So I've just been all in on World War II stuff lately and different angles of it, but it was kind of interesting to so much of this series kind of shows you how the war wraps up, and so to be in that moment
Mhm.
before the war really amps up was fun this week. But between those and Schindler's List, and then Andor is essentially the same thing
Oh,
too. So
yes.
it's
Yeah.
like we've really
Emmy
been
award
thinking
winning,
about
we can proudly
fascism.
say now too.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So, but I'm very excited to talk about this and excited. I thought the show was great, and I'm excited to unpack it a little bit.
Absolutely, and folks, I've already warned you for this, but this is a full spoiler conversation, so if you haven't seen the 9 episodes, make sure you go do that, go watch that, and then come back to this point in the podcast because 'cause you've been forewarned. Everything is fair game beyond this point. The real history, which, I hope we're not spoiling people to actually what happened 80 years ago, but in the case that we are, I'm sorry, but, go to Wikipedia or look up a history book or something like that. Go to your local library, go support your local
Mhm.
library and pull out a World War II book and learn about it. Um, but Greg, let's start there at the kind of the beginning here, because you mentioned like this was a show that you had on your list for a while here. I feel like we do this a lot on the show, right? You mentioned something in passing. You're like, oh, I'd be interested, and I haven't seen that yet, but it'd be interested. I'm like, oh well, guess what? You're
It's
coming on the
good.
show to
No.
talk about it.
I
um,
appreciate it.
so W prior to watching this series, what was your knowledge base of the air war in Europe during World War II?
Um, I would say, it was worse than I thought it was, right? I think, prior to
Okay.
watching the show, if you had asked me, I would have said like, "Oh, I basically understand it." And, I remember quite clearly, just to dip back into your episode last week, which I haven't listened to, but the topic of that episode,
Yes.
is, I remember very clearly when the Mustangs show up at the end of Saving
Mhm.
Private Ryan, and I remember, I saw that movie originally with my aunt. I had like a cool younger aunt who took me to cool movies, and that was one.
I'll
And
get you into the rated R films, Greg.
yeah, she also took me to the first Jurassic Park I saw with her. I
Oh,
think we
nice.
might have talked about it at one point. So my aunt Marcia took my cousin Jessamine, who's the same age as me, and I to that movie. And my grandfather, I have two grandfathers who fought in the World War, and they were not interested in seeing it. Her dad was like, "No, I
That's
don't need to
fair.
hear about see you Saving Private Ryan." But I remember she like pointed out, like, I remember those planes come in and she whispered, like, it's the Mustangs. And I like instantly knew that that was something that mattered. And so I learned a little bit more.
Mhm.
I had also seen Red Tails opening weekend. I'm glad it was the two of us in different
Yes.
theaters.
Yes.
That was 50% of the box office. So I knew a little bit of that history. And I will say, listening to you discuss that with your guest, I was kicking myself because I once was at the National Air and Space Museum with two
Mhm.
Tuskegee Airmen were there signing books. And I saw them
Oh,
sitting at the
wow.
table and I wanted to go to talk, but this is when I was in college. This is barely an excuse. I could not afford two books. And it seemed so
Of course.
awkward to me to walk up and essentially be like, which one of you two great American heroes should I pick? And so
Yep.
I chickened out and didn't talk to either of them and didn't get either book, which is really lame, and I deeply regret because as you pointed out, so many of those men have passed now. It was really one
Yeah.
of the last opportunities I'm sure I'll have ever had to, or the last one. So I knew kind of those pieces around the edges of it, but
Mhm.
certainly not the level of detail this show got into. I think I also was familiar. I knew that American pilots went over early and started fighting with the British before we were really kind of formally in the war.
Mhm.
But this obviously filled in a lot more of that and what those looked like. And God, I love a show with a good map. There are a lot of good map scenes in
Oof.
this.
Ooh, a lot of good briefing sequences. Yep.
Yeah,
Good
very
maps.
much so.
Big maps
And
too.
Yeah, thought about George Lucas a lot, and obviously, the inspiration is an Ouroboros there, but that's what he did so well in Star Wars is give you a kind of play by play about what you're about to see, and that's what the show managed to
Yeah.
do, obviously using the real history. So it was really fun and really helpful to see that. Also, a reminder how much the public education system failed me. I'm like, I don't know if I could have, if you gave me a map of Germany, I don't know if I could have put in a pin to say this is where Berlin is or this is where Paris is in France necessarily. But, reading some of that, and I've been reading the Rick Atkinson third volume of his World War II
Oh,
trilogy,
wow.
just all World War II all the time. So I've been in maps a lot and enjoying thinking about this history.
That's what the last guns of daylight or something like
Uh,
the
yes, it is. It because they're all named after daytimes. You're
yeah,
right
I
that
was like
it's the
"Oh,
last
it's an
one.
army at daylight." I know that. An army at dawn is the
Yep.
first one. And then
It's
I'm
the
I'm blanking
guns
on the
at
middle.
last light.
The Guns of Last Light.
So
I was pretty close
yep,
off
yep,
the
very
cuff
close.
there.
And that
Rick
starts
Atkinson,
with
great.
D-Day and goes through till the end of the war. But I had
Mhm.
actually just read the chapter on Operation Dragoon right
Ah,
before
yes.
the
The
doctor
invasion of southern France,
shows
yeah.
up. Yeah, and so when that episode with the actual Tuskegee Airmen hit, I was like, "Oh, I just read about this." I don't think it had mentioned the Tuskegee Airmen prominently as a part of telling that story. It was more concerned with the movement of the army. So it was nice that it all kind of folded together, and I have learned a lot, and I'm only like halfway through that book, so I'm excited to see where it goes. I think maybe
Don't
Berlin.
spoil
We'll
the
see.
ending. Maybe not if it fall I think if I remember correctly, it just follows the American side of things, so,
Oh, okay. So we might not
we
get
don't
there.
capture Berlin, so we go
Yeah.
south. We let the Russians handle that one. Yeah, those books are great. I remember reading them, when they came out, 2005-ish?
Sounds right.
10-year-old me reading them, whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, other kids were reading, novels and fun things, and then I was over there reading nonfiction. I was like, "You guys gotta get
Wow.
on board with this thing." Um,
Yeah.
so, on the opposite end of things, I've been studying this since 2004. So this is a series that I was highly anticipating, right? Because I had been a big
Sure.
fan of the Band of Brothers sequences that they've done on HBO as well as the Pacific, and this has kind of been a show that was in the early stages, or at least some level of production, since like 2012 when they announced it,
Mm.
and finally came to pass at 2025. Even COVID couldn't shut it down. Thank you to Apple for and Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks for pushing this all the way through to the end, and um, happy to talk about like honestly, yeah, the Mustang's the cool part of Saving Private Ryan, right? That end sequence there. I'm glad Ed Durant had that same like fist pump in the air moment and they come in. Um, have you ever had a chance to like hear them have you ever seen a World War II bird fly in the sky at all? Like, you saying you've been to the World War, not the, you've been to the Air and Space Museum in DC, which has some World War II birds, but they're on the ground. They're not up in the air. Have you ever heard like some of these engines flying?
I haven't. I was listening to you and remind me Destination World War II's first name. I forgot her first name.
Ashley, yes.
Ashley, great episode on Red Tails. She was a real sport for a movie she didn't really like that much. But when you both were like enthusiastically talking about the air show in Pennsylvania, I was like, that sounds amazing
Hmm.
to get to see these aircraft. And I certainly have seen footage and videos on social media of those types of air shows. But for whatever reason, maybe we're just in too many hills. But up where I grew up in New Hampshire, air shows weren't a thing, or I wasn't
Okay,
really,
not in
I
tune to
never
the
heard of them,
yeah.
so if it's my family didn't pay attention, so I never saw them, but, so I don't believe I ever have, and I've never made it out to the hangar in outside DC where the Air and Space Museum has a lot more ship or
Yes,
crafts.
the
Um,
Udvar Hazy Center. Yeah,
yeah, I've only been to the one right on the mall, so that's on my DC list is I gotta get out there, and see the full collection because there's an X-wing out there too, I believe,
there is
but
an
also
X-wing actually on the that's at the mall. So
oh, is there? No,
that's
that
on the mall. So yep. So that was in
typical, right?
2019 that they brought that out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, So, at the Udvar Hazy Center, they have, Enola Gay, which is the plane that dropped the,
Right.
atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Um, They also have an SR-71 Blackbird, which is pretty cool. So
Hmm.
for us X-Men fans, especially the early films with Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, who are coming back into the fold again, maybe we get to see a
Yeah.
resurgence of that again in Avengers: Doomsday. And they have a Challenger, the Discovery. Sorry, the Discovery, the space shuttle from like
It's one of
2010 or
them,
something like
yeah.
that. Really cool, really cool. So
Yeah.
yes, definitely worth checking out if you ever get the chance to go out there. But have been to World War II weekend a few times in my life, which is a really incredible experience. You ever get the chance? You know, the kids are a little older. You want to do a family road trip on a weekend? Head on down to Pennsylvania.
It's not too far.
So, yeah, yep. Good. Go enjoy that for a little bit, maybe if they're still flying birds out there. But having done that for many years, they have B-17s that fly there,
Mm.
as well as many other World War II style aircraft that are still working. And they offer flights in them for not for a fee. So when I graduated high school, my graduation present from my grandfather to myself was that he and I would take a flight in it. So he spent
Wow.
the money, so we got a nice half-hour flight above Reading, Pennsylvania, in this B-17, and it was really cool experience because once you take off, then they're like, "Hey, walk around," and they had the
Oh,
guns
cool.
all in places where they exist, and to walk across like the very tightrope areas where
Mm.
the bombs would be, and to see the Norden bomb site and the wing to go into the nose of it was so cool. And the fun part is, so my grandfather. Not only is he a little older now, but he's a little, well, it's at that time, a little on the heavier side. Found his way climbing into that nose and somehow made it through. And at that point in the flight, we were getting close to landing, so the pilot or one of the crew members that were in there came over to him and was like, "Hey, just strap yourself in there, boss." So he got to land in the nose, like
Wow.
some of these guys did back in the day, and while the rest of us are in these like makeshift chairs that they threw back there. So really cool experience, and yeah, to have that that physical understanding of what the space is like that these guys are walking through is a whole new dimension of understanding. But
Mm.
what this show really does is taking that and then adding the human cost concept to that too, right? Where
Yeah.
you were letting it, okay, these guys were just in college or high school and got plucked out, and now they're maybe flying for the first time in their life. So you're putting yourself into these shoes of these guys that uh were born in the 1920s. And, aviation is really only like 10 years old realistically by that point in terms of a larger scale than just like the Wright brothers taking off from a bunch of sand dunes in North Carolina. And now they're flying over Germany and having these incredible adventures over there. So really incredible that this story is able to come to place here. And, this isn't the first time that Hanks and Spielberg and team have really um, tackled the World War II subject at all, right? Spielberg several times to this point, and then Hanks, of course, in Saving Private Ryan, and then they're both the creative minds theoretically behind Band of Brothers and The Pacific. I know Spielberg has definitely touched a lot of others with Amblin through the years too. Um, so, w- why do you think that their team wanted to showcase this particular story in this day and age? Why the air war in 2025?
Hmm. I mean, it, it comes to mind that, once you did Band of Brothers and the Pacific, to continue on, you had to find something kind of more specific, right? You kind of did the big
Hmm.
version of what happens in Europe and what happens in the Pacific. So it makes sense that, amongst that, you need to find a more specific story. And I think, when you look at the options there, I don't think it's like inappropriate to say like this is like thrilling, right? Like there's something about
Yes,
aerial
yeah,
dogfights and the visuals of a bomber squadron. And, when I was seeing it, I was struck by like that's a thing I mean, hopefully, but seemingly we'll never see again in this world. I mean, I think weapons have advanced now. It would be a field of missiles, not a field
yeah.
of bombers and so on. So it's really kind of incredible to think of what these men did. And I really like that point you just made, which is like, it's shocking to think how close to Kitty Hawk we are, right? Like it's not that these
Yeah.
have been around forever and everything's figured out. And, I was watching, I love good, like, switch flipping, and so when
Mhm.
they're using their equipment in the cockpit and they're kind of, the very advanced bomb sight, but you realize, like, this is not an advanced piece of equipment. It is for the time, but, they always joke about how, our cell phones are more powerful than the computers that took Apollo to the moon. It's like, we're even, like, a far step back from that, a very far step back from that, so
Absolutely.
it feels so rudimentary. And I think most of us now, when we take a commercial air flight, we might get nervous, but we're not actually thinking at any moment we could just kind of fall from the sky. And it felt like air travel was not even at that level yet, and
Absolutely.
so it was such a risk just to take off and land, never mind fly through flak and have enemy fighters, and so on.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
really liked that moment towards the end. I'm gonna forget the character's name, but when they're taking the milk run with the food, he's like, "Yeah, I've never flown before. Like, I took a boat over
Oh,
here,
yes,
and
he's
then yeah,
yeah, I'm forgetting his exact name, but yeah, he's the mechanic, right? He's a
yeah."
mechanic. He knows how to work on these things, but he's never actually flown.
It's just crazy, and I thought the documentary did a good job of pointing out that that's how most of them showed up to training, and they kinda got to crash through. It's not literally a bad joke, but they got a quick overview, and then they had to just take off, and, the one guy saying, like, "I did it over and over again until I got it right, and then they cleared me. They decided not to boot me from the program." It's pretty incredible. And so I think all of that folds into, like, it's a good story to tell. It's a nice complement to the other stories. And
Mhm.
absolutely Band of Brothers in the Pacific. And I really put Saving Private Ryan there as, like, the opening of that of this project, right? And
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that they haven't tried to do D-Day again, because they did it as good as they possibly could, and they're gonna kind of tell the stories around that. And I just loved the moment in this where they look out of the side of the aircraft and they see the flotilla on its way,
Mhm.
and you're like, yeah, and because of Saving Private Ryan, I know exactly the story that's unfolding there, and you could, you know,
Splice it together into one supercut.
exactly right. I was thinking, yeah, Topher Grace or somebody can come in and edit all the material to be one continuous. But yeah, I think it was a great choice, and it was really exciting at times, to watch, and really thrilling.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and ending and everything you said there. I mean, this is really for some I feel like there's so many World War II movies, but yet this is an aspect of the war that really has not been showcased on the
Mm,
medium of film before, not even just TV series, but film, right? I'm the only one I really comes to mind is the early '90s Memphis Belle film with an all-star cast of people. I think Matthew Modine in it and a couple
cool.
others that kind of chronicle the story of how they get to 25 missions completed and the cost that it took on that. But the group that's an early '90s level of like grimness and brutality, and there's still very much a plucky existence to it. I mean, Harry Connick Jr.'s in it, and it's just it has like some jovial moments, I will say, and this really gets at the heart of these guys going up in the planes, having these incredible experiences, and if they survive, coming back in these depleted planes and then going to the bar afterwards and drinking their sorrows away. Like they're not in a they're not in a foxhole. They're
Yeah.
not on a ship, right? This is a completely different experience, and that's the joke that you hear about military people at times, like, oh, you Air Force guys, you just get to sleep in your bed every night, but there's still a cost to that, and the brutality that these guys have. I mean, uh just for listeners' sake here, right? These guys are up in these planes and they're literally made of aluminum. So like
Mm,
any of these flak that's in the air and just if you really wanted to, you could probably take a screwdriver and just push right through it if the exterior of this vessel, if you will, and push and punch a hole through it if you really wanted to.
yeah.
So in terms of the safety, right, they call these planes the flying fortresses, and that's kind of a joke. They're not flying fortresses. They're very destructible. Um, and whether it was like the mental thing of like, oh yeah, we have all these machine guns on this and all that, but the way that the Germans were just taking out these planes and the staggering losses that they had for the minimal gains that they got, because German production continues to increase all the way up through almost March of 1945 before it starts to plateau. I mean, they
Yeah.
weren't really disrupting the war production at that point, because they just moved the factories underground and were working around the clock to keep things moving and all that stuff. So, but the morale effect is also another aspect to that. Bombing of homes and whatnot is a very important thing to factor in when you're trying to defeat an enemy. If they have no place to sleep at night, they're gonna not probably do great work the next day at the office. If you're following my meaning there, folks. But yeah, this is definitely a series that gets into that, and just like the horrors that they're facing, right? Oh, some guy is hit in the back of the plane, and you hear him screaming in your in your headset, right? Like,
Yeah.
what a very unique, and this frankly only happened. This is the only war since that has had major bombing campaigns like this. Now we've did bombing campaigns in Korea and Vietnam, but not to the level and strategic nature that was done on this level in World War II, both in Germany and Japan as well. Um, so very, very interesting that they want to tell the story. And I think too, another aspect to this that I want to say is a thank you to Apple, because in this day and age of streaming, like, this wasn't a cheap show to make. And there's a
No.
reason why I think maybe HBO at some point bowed out of this. Now, you could probably say, I think because maybe Spielberg had that little deal with Apple around 2019 or something like that, once he started getting less grumpy about streaming services. But this had like a 250, $300 million budget to do, with a lot of top name actors in their primes working on this, and devoting a lot of time out of their busy schedules, also during COVID too. And the fact that the show arguably looks really this good and came out the way that it did, giving all the things against it, perhaps, is a real testament to, like, maybe the stigma perhaps that Apple TV has, right? Where it's not necessarily a stigma. It's just like the running joke where it's like, okay, they give you money and they don't care ultimately, like they're not going to cancel it, right? It's not like the Netflix or Disney or HBO kind of thing where they give it two seasons, if that, in one season, and
Yeah.
then say, "Oh, you're too expensive, Acolyte," right? Like, we got backlash. We're not moving forward this thing here. We'll take our money elsewhere. And so, as in an era where streaming platforms are spending less and less on those properties and maybe diverting it towards other things, who knows, theatrical perhaps. This is not a show that could have really survived well in a theatrical setting, in my opinion, right? You can't just distill the story from these 9 hours into those 2 hours, right? You wouldn't get an episode like they're the only plane that comes back from this bombing run, and then they're
Mm.
like, "Go spend a week out, basically in therapy, but not in therapy. We're not gonna call it that
Yeah.
because it's the '40s. Go enjoy this English chateau and go, like, swim and do stuff for a week, or go to this
Yeah.
conference in Oxford," because, like, they wouldn't have that in a movie, right? 2.5 hours at most. You're not getting to that point. So the fact that they were able to dig into these characters and the trauma that these men experienced, um, it's only something I think that's feasible because of when it came out and when Spielberg and Hanks made deals along the way. And Apple said, "Hey, we're great. Here's money. Go and do it."
Yeah. Yeah, Apple, I mean, they deserve praise in exactly what you're giving them. They're such an interesting streamer because money in some ways doesn't matter to them because the company makes so much on all of its other stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
So
look at
so it
F1. That's
gives
another example of the theatrical
yeah,
experience, right? 300 million to that. That
absolutely.
would Warner Brothers ain't doing that.
Well, and I really think, that means what motivates them is being a kind of prestige luxury brand.
Yes, yes,
And
that's
so
exactly it.
yeah, so getting involved with these names I think is great, and there's a reason they released Martin Scorsese's movie, and they
Mhm.
they do these kind of sweet deals with these creators. The new Spike Lee movie too.
That's a good point.
And
Yeah.
and so I do think it it fits the pattern for them, but they do deserve praise because I do think this is the type of project that is like it's a solid show. It's a show that we can all enjoy, but it is more about creating more of a historical record. And
Mhm.
I think that has been a part of I know Spielberg and Hanks have done all these programs, and then they've also been doing the programs that go record veteran stories and captured a lot of,
Yes.
that thinking. I think I don't know if I said this on air at all, but I'm about to go with my father on a trip. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he's taking a trip from New
Ah.
Hampshire, sponsored by a charity that brings veterans down to see the memorials in DC, and I'm his chaperone. And that program, as I got oriented to it at orientation, they talked about how Spielberg and Hanks had brought down a huge group from their organization for the premiere of Band of Brothers and put them all up in hotels and captured their stories on
Mm.
video to try to make
Yeah.
sure, the kind of moment where sadly kind of past now, where we were really trying to capture those greatest generation stories. And I think this does important work. There are people who will never watch those videos, who will never go to the museums, who might not have
Mhm.
access to the monuments, but will spin up a show and understand these stories a lot better.
Yeah, and this is just for the production of this. This is one of the, I think, probably the first of this kind of show where, unlike Band of Brothers of the Pacific, the majority of the cast was not alive to have like
Mm.
the cast talk to their real life counterpart to then get like insights or learn about their thing. They had to talk to family members or consult books or historical record. Like they had to pull from what they could that existed, or if there was an interview with them back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whenever they were alive, right? And for a lot of them, it was sadly no, because they didn't get a chance
Yeah.
to tell their story until now. And it's just the sad thing that gets lost to history. And a lot of this generation wasn't prepared or wanted to talk about it, or it wasn't, it was tableau, right? The war's over. We're moving on.
Yeah.
We're moving to the suburbs. We're getting jobs, right? We're going to college. We're changing the world now. And I'm glad that this exists now because of that. And it's right. Apple is that prestige, right? What so what that slow horses show getting renewed for 3 more seasons, and they're filming right away as they just had one. I mean, that's a dream in this day and age.
Yeah.
Unheard
Oh,
of.
absolutely. You compare that, the book series is very similar to like the Thursday Murder Club, and it's like Netflix gave that one
Mm,
movie with a good cast and a good director, like a named director. I don't know if he's a good director, but he's a named director. He's got a good name, and so things like that. And yeah, Apple will continue to throw money after these projects. And my personal opinion is I have never been disappointed by an Apple TV Plus show. I guess no
mhm,
free
mhm.
ads, but like they put in the quality that I think I vary greatly on your Netflix originals. Some of those are just complete trash in my
It's
opinion.
true.
And so, I do think that paying for good actors, good directors, good script writers, it does pay off. But I'm sure Apple wishes they had Netflix's money and, or sorry, numbers,
Well,
the viewership
numbers
records and
probably,
so on.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Well, I
uh,
mean, maybe it'll come, but as I bet you someone could do the math of where Apple is now, so roughly what, 6 years, 5, 6 years into their tenure
yeah,
versus where Netflix was, like, what's the awards comparison, right? And just looking at this
yeah,
past Emmys, where it was Severance and The Studio, right?
yeah.
Both Apple productions, like, they're clearing house when it comes to, like, this prestige level work that you're referring to here, and it seems like they're gonna just keep doing that as they say, "Hey, this is your passion project, big name director. Come on over and do it.
We'll figure it
Have
out.
fun
Yeah,
with it."
we'll get you there. Yeah. And they should have a
So,
couple more splashy releases, movies wise, before the awards race. So we'll have to see how they do Oscar time, but
ooh,
we'll
and
see.
that's another one. Yeah, who knows? Oscar season. I mean, that F1 could get some of those, under the radar Oscars, right? Some
It.
sound, some
I was gonna say it's
production.
getting sound. I can almost guarantee it. Like things that go vroom and things that go boom is how Jen always describes that
That's true.
category. And
That's
so,
true, and it's got
yeah,
both of them.
we got a lot. We got a lot of rooms and a few booms.
I can't forget that Zimmer score too, because that's been
True.
awesome to have on the background as I've been working these last couple of days here. Anywho, Masters of the Air follows the journey of the 100th Bomb Group, aka the quote unquote Bloody 100th. At the start of the show, attempted to provide different experiences and viewpoints to make the viewer understand the weight of what it took to get in those planes and mission after mission. Do you believe that the show really achieved that endeavor? And what moments stood out to you across the series that kind of highlighted that fact?
I so the answer is an unqualified yes, and I will say that to me, this success in this area comes down to the high highs and the low lows, which often happen seconds apart, right? That
Okay, yeah, yeah.
just just getting into that cockpit and the visuals, the dropping of the bombs out the bay door will never not be cool to look at and to be
Hmm.
excited by, and there's all of that. And yet that's all interrupted in a second with often pretty horrific violence, right? I remember, I think it was the first episode where the co-pilot's face just gets completely blown
Yep.
apart in an
There's
instant.
nothing left. Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, like the fact that, they are unflinching in showing the reality, that's something
Hmm.
Saving Private Ryan got a lot of credit for, rightfully, for their Normandy invasion. And I do think, though, that is upsetting and important, that that's a part of what we're seeing here, that the fact that you're the bloody 100th is you do get to be the guy in the cool leather jacket with the cool scarf at the bar, but it's not guaranteed how long that's gonna last, right? Like, it all disappears in a second, and, I think you're right. I don't know, I've never been in one of these, unlike you. I'm pretty jealous of that experience, but, what I know of them comes from, like, Joseph Heller's Catch-22 and, the
It's a great
poem
one.
Death
Yeah.
Death of the Ball Turret Gunner, right? And so I understand how claustrophobic those spaces are and how isolated you are, that you could be a part of this incredible crew, but also be really alone while
Oh man.
potentially bleeding to death because of shrapnel and kind of going out with a whimper, not a bang. And I think the show really balanced those factors, that I found myself thinking these are the most glamorous guys in the world, but also they must have been horribly scarred by what they went through, which is the kind of catch-22 of what I think these guys lived through. To me, it was symbolized at the very start of the Bloody 100th documentary. They pull in Jimmy Stewart in a newsreel clip I had never seen, where
Yeah.
I knew Jimmy Stewart had joined up. I don't think I knew he was in the Air Force. And, you get good old George Bailey being like, "Gee Willikers, you should fly a plane." And it's like so crazy, but you understand that that's the kind of hotshot flyboy image. It starts there with the movie star ready
Hmm.
to go, and then it is the real life of these guys. But I don't think that's the part that they think about. They think about their fallen comrades and how many they lost and the time they were the only plane that survived. And I really, the last, I'm rambling too much, but the last point is, I really liked that eventually they basically all got shot down, right? And so you
Yeah.
understand that the odds were out of their favor, and that you get to see what it's like. And again, the documentary confirms these are all real stories about, it wasn't the end. You sometimes the shoot worked and you got out in time, and then you had to survive to make your way back. And some of those crazy moments where they're, on a back of a Jeep arriving back at the airfield, you're just like,
Yes.
it's unbelievable. And I think that, again, is just a part of this. Like, it is totally unbelievable, and it's worth telling the story for that reason too.
You want to know what's really unbelievable, Greg?
Yeah.
Is that they never got any training on how to like use the parachute, like to jump out of the plane. Like them jumping out, like bailing out and using the parachute was their first time that they
That's
would be
crazy.
practicing that. So they didn't get any room for error there. So
I,
just
I'm
adding
thinking
that.
of Tom Cruise just setting the Guinness World Record for number of jumps with a burning parachute. It's like Tom Cruise got more training than the guys actually in it. So
Literally,
yeah.
literally. I mean, I don't know if it was just like hubris, right? To think like, oh, they'll never need to do it, or just the speed of like, we got to get these guys over there, and the harsh reality of like, you kind of general issue, right? Your GIs,
Yeah.
we'll fill up the ranks with other people, which they actually did experience some problems with getting people to sign up for the Army Air Force at that
Mm.
time. because of the incredible losses and the newsreels coming back of people seeing like the planes getting shot down and hearing about the incredible stories that were happening overseas and just how that was all going and yeah they struggled to get people afterwards and that's why they had
Sure.
to increase the like I know like for a large part of the series right they're like okay it's 25 missions and then as soon as Rosie gets to there then it's like we bumped it up and they keep doing it they keep bumping it up until I think it eventually gets to 35 if not even higher. I apologize if I got that wrong, folks, but that seems really insurmountable. Especially when you're like, I've done 3, and I barely made it through those 3 missions, and I can't. You're sending me to my death, right?
Yeah.
The courage and strength to day in and day out get up and then climb into that aluminum coffin, basically, and then fly off and you've got probably an hour and a half of, like, twiddling your thumbs to be like, "Oh, well, we'll see what happens," and then about 10 minutes or so of, like, utter chaos, and then
Yeah.
and then it's the return home, and hopefully you didn't lose 3 engines or 4 engines and have to bail out or, land in Scotland or whatever, whatever circumstance it requires, but it's crazy that, like, this is what people experience, and, of course, these just some other added factors that I think they do well in this series too is, like, especially that sequence there where there's choiceless choices, and this ultimately. So I'll wrap this not wrap this up, but I'll add a caveat to this, where I think it's a through line through all these movies that we've and shows that we've watched in this series here is that all these are good story, they're good films or whatever medium you want to call it. And because they're good, they are anti-war films, right? A
Mm.
good war film is therefore an anti-war film, in my opinion. I hope others take that opinion too when it comes to this type of stuff. Um, but it shouldn't glorify things, and it should highlight the tragedies and the horrific things, right? Because if we recognize this and learn what these people went through in order to preserve good in this world, right? The fight against Germany is a good fight. It keeps the Holocaust from continuing from one day further. It then hopefully lets us as people realize like, okay, we need to do everything in our power to prevent that. And I think that this show showcases in a way that really hasn't been portrayed to a general audience before and these tragedies that these guys went through, right? Could you imagine being a ball turret gunner, right? Like a 5'3" guy, just from a farm in Missouri that has never flown into the plane before in his life, and now you're looking and you're literally 25,000 feet. There's only glass holding you back, and
Yeah,
you're in
it's
this kind
crazy.
of you're locked in. You can't get out. You have to have someone pull the thing for you, and then pull yourself out, basically and that sequence where the poor guy is stuck in there and he
Yeah.
like, the kid
Oh,
knows, like, "I gotta make the choice here for myself here. Like,
yeah.
I can't, I'm sorry." And that kid I think the plane blows up before, before he, like, has to plummet 20,000 feet to his death,
Right.
but, like, that's tragic, if someone gets hit on the plane, right? These guys aren't medics. There's no medic
Mhm.
on the plane. There's no one they're all trained to be a bombardier, a navigator, a gunner, right? Well, the pilot, they're not given any medical training whatsoever. They
Yeah.
barely know what to. So again, like learning how to parachute out of something as you're doing it, right? They're also giving very haphazard medical equipment and
Yeah.
train and trying to save the guy that's like bleeding out. You're like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And they're 20,000 feet up in the sky. These planes aren't pressurized, so that's why they're in all these like heavy equipment and wool clothing and whatnot. They have these electric suits that are trying to heat them, but if they took their gloves off for whatever reason, try and fix a machine gun because they couldn't, and they get their hands stuck to things,
Oh,
or they'd stick to a wall and then rip their skin off, right? That's like they crazy. That's like this was a daily existence for these people, and the show highlighted again so many of those sequences throughout and an engine blowing up, right? Great. Now we're down to 3. Oh no, now the plane's split in half. Bail out, guys, and then it's the journey after that, right? I think the incredible sequence where it showcases those 2 guys that do survive out of a plane and then it follows their journey of like, oh, um, do I surrender or do I want to try and escape back? right?
Mm.
What choice do I do? And it shows them with the Belgian and French resistance as they're going through that, and that, again, a different story that you kind of think happens, but you never really like get told because it's not a sexy movie per se. Um, and because of the 9 episodes that the show has to offer, it allowed them to explore some of those stories, and just again, it's tragic what these guys had to go through, and it's a good thing that they probably didn't know at the time that German production didn't stop because they kept bombing as they kept losing their guys. Because if they had known that, like the psyche of things, right? In Vietnam, right, as guys are out there in the fields, they're getting news from the United States pretty regularly, and they're seeing like the anti-war movements and stuff like that, and that
Mm.
kind of impacted their them being like, "What am I doing
Yeah.
here?" And they're seeing things that happen around them, and just adding to the whole factor of everything here. So the government kind of control of what comes in and what comes out really impacted their experience, I think, too, in this matter of how the heck do I get in this plane every day? What a duality it is, and even from freaking Crosby, who's air sick. Like
So funny.
what a duality of him, right? Like, oh my gosh, why is this guy in this plane here and telling them how to get from place to place? But he somehow pulls that. That's the story of the Greatest Generation. There is these guys. Um, Pulled from whatever their day job was or school, and then forced to do, not necessarily forced in some cases, but chose to sacrifice a few years of their life and do these incredible feats, whatever they needed to do to get the job done, and then went back home. And
Yeah.
I think Crosby even becomes a professor out there. I think he teaches at Harvard for a couple of years on your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
that in the doc. That's crazy.
yeah, so crazy how they're just able to put it away. But really, did they? I don't know. I think the scars lingered with them, as the show suggests too. Um, but the majority of Masters of the Air are centered around the friendship of Major John Bucky Egan and Major Gale Buck Clevin, portrayed by Callum Turner and Austin Butler, respectively. What did you think of their performances? Because that's really the linchpin of this show, if you will.
Mm. Um, Brief aside. So, as I started watching this, we got the trailer for Wake Up Dead Man, the third Knives Out
Yes.
movie,
Yep.
and I was like, "Oh wow, Josh O'Connor looks like he's going to be amazing in this." And then I start watching Masters of the Air. I'm like, "Oh wow, Josh O'Connor's in this." And I saw the trailer for the new Elizabeth Olsen movie Eternity. I'm like, "Wow, Josh O'Connor's everywhere." And little did I know that Callum Turner and Josh O'Connor are in fact two different people who just
They very much
somewhat
are.
look alike. I ran it by my wife and she said I'm okay. They look close enough that she forgives me, but she's like, these are clearly two different men. Like you really should have figured this out before now. So I'm not that familiar with Callum Turner, or if I am, I probably gave credit to Josh O'Connor
You might have.
for that.
Greg didn't see
but
George Clooney's Boys in the Boat.
I did. Oh yeah. So I probably thought
Callum
Josh
Turner, but with
O'Connor, because
blonde
Josh
hair.
O'Connor was great in that.
You either thought he was Josh O'Connor or you didn't recognize him with blonde hair.
Okay. All right.
Or you were
But
too amazed
I
with Joel Edgerton the entire time, too. Like, it's Uncle
that could have
Owen.
also be Uncle Owen, Uncle Owen. So I was very familiar with Austin Butler. I think a lot of people encountered him when he portrayed Elvis and was kind of like, wow, who's this guy? And then he has gone on. I mean, the Dune movies, absolutely crazy. That what he goes to there, and I really liked him in both Bike Riders, and he has a movie out right
Yeah.
now called
The Wreckers? Is that the
no,
name? I don't know.
what's I just listened to a podcast about it earlier today. The new Darren Aronofsky movie that he stars in and is very good in, as kind of a dirtbag in '90s New York. It's very
So I
good.
have my caught
Caught
stealing.
Stealing. Yes. Oh, we
Yes,
were racing
yes.
into Letterboxd. So Austin Powers, Austin Butler, Austin Powers too, but Austin Butler is clearly having a moment, and you like can see why here. This is a part of that moment, but I think it just predates a lot of the like everybody knows his name
Yeah.
stardom. And you can see it still. I have a good friend who told me his son is in like a junior in high school, and he said Austin Butler just defines like modern masculinity to his son. It's like that's a real man. That's a guy. I'm like, you could do worse for a role model. He's
That's true. That's true.
yeah, he's
He
not
hasn't
bad.
offended the
So
world yet with something.
true. Yeah, it's still to come. Good thing you mentioned that now in case somebody listens to this in 10 years and like, I can't
That's
believe they're
right.
talking about Austin who got
They're coming
canceled
back
that
at us.
next week. Yeah. So I thought the friendship between them was really well done, and I liked both performances a lot. I think all of that long explanation was to say I was a little more drawn to Austin Butler. He just has that kind of
Interesting.
James Dean star quality. And I did kind of fall for it, quote unquote. I really did think we'd lost Bucky for a little
Mm,
while there, and then the story played out. And I think I really what I liked about them is they always kind of towed that line of how friendship would have been back then. That I have very good male friends will say I love you to each other, and it's not weird in this modern day, but that would not have happened in the 40s,
they're
right?
not telling that. Yeah, they're not saying it
No.
to each other.
Absolutely not. So, like, I do think they kind of found that way, and even like hugging, right? Like, I think hugging
Hmm.
between two men was so much less acceptable back then. There were some, obviously, because life or death circumstances, but I thought they also found that balance between kind of the cockiness of the flyboy and then the kind of humility of the later stages when they're in the prisoner of war camp. And
Mm.
then I did find myself a little angry at the end that you build to the moment of Callum Turner on the flagpole. I'm like, oh man, this has been the credits. Like, I've seen this like many times. I was a little upset that I'd seen that visual so many times, considering how poignant a moment it was. But I think they both did a fantastic job, and seemed like they took it seriously, which I mean only as much as there was no showboating. They wanted to, like the Greatest Generation, kind of put their heads down and get the job done, is how it all felt.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. They're yin and yang to each other because they're very much different people, right?
Mm.
Buck, well, I don't. I'll be honest, I don't know. Oh, of course, I have the whole cast list right in front of me here. I just want to make sure I got it right. So, Austin Butler's Buck Clevin is a bit more reserved and mild mannered and whatnot, right? He's not a drinker. He's almost the exact opposite to the more brash and unruly and in your face Callum Turner's Bucky Egan, which true to form. But yet, I think for the men that serve under them, right? They're like, okay, these two are the spectrum here, and if I exist in between there, then I'm okay, right? They're
Mm.
if your leaders are showing you what is permissible in terms of your how you present yourself and your actions and whatnot, then they're it, right?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing to ponder there as these guys are spending so much time with each other in not just combat situations too. It's not like they're a squad, all of the Saving Private Ryan, if you will, going from place to place and engaging in battles. No, they go do their mission, and they come back and they go to the club and, and the officers club that being, and have a couple drinks, wash down whatever trauma you experienced that day, and somehow I assume these guys are really hungover all the time, getting up and crack of dawn and getting told, "Hey, you're going to this dangerous place now today too. Oh, no air,
Yeah.
no cover support for most of this way. Okay, great. And high flak probably great. It's, but to have those guys, showcasing this is what is acceptable in terms of how you conduct yourself around camp and in battle, right? I feel like that would be a big morale boost for these guys that are losing men every time they go up into the sky.
Mm.
Um, so I think their performances are really well done. I find it interesting that I hadn't known about the story of these guys heading into watching this, right? And there was a part of me that thought, okay, it'll be similar to the Band of Brothers and the Pacific route where your main protagonists kind of lead you through the entirety of the series. And really around episode 5, that's where Buck Clevin goes down, and
Mm.
and then I think in the next episode, that's also when Egan goes down too. So we're like, oh wow, we're we got like half the series left, and they're both in camp, like in prisoner of war camps, and now we're shifting. We got to shift focus now here too. This is from a from a subverting expectations kind of standpoint here for this quote unquote third chapter of this saga
Yeah.
trilogy of World War II series is they really diverted the expectation on that front, and I thought that was an interesting way to do that, because I remember when I watched the first time, both my wife and I, and when the news came to, because Egan is in London, and having a very frivolous time over there
Mm.
on leave, and he calls in to see like how how the game went yesterday, and
Yeah.
then he
Loved
finds
that.
out that he finds out through a variety of code that Buck Clevin went down, and he's like, well, I guess I'm playing tomorrow, so he cuts his
Mm.
own leave short, and it's like a revenge tour for him, which I thought was really good to showcase like this uh brotherly bond that was forged between these two guys. That one lived in Wyoming, and I think one, I think, if I'm getting this wrong, Missouri or Minnesota. I couldn't exactly tell you, uh,
Mm.
but not from the same place, and they would never meet each other under other circumstances than what the army presented to them. And yeah, and like I said, they go down, and they have their struggles in the camp, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
maybe
Some
some
fighting. Mhm.
I think maybe some alcohol withdrawals for Egan. He seemed to be bit more on the heavy side of things than with a complete cold turkey stop. he
Yeah.
he had a bit of struggle there that I think manifested in a couple of those fighting sequences there. But yeah, I mean, it was not a pleasant experience being in those prisoner of war camps, from what this show also depicts too, and the fear of like, what are the Germans going to do? Is it one bad day? Do they just the machine guns take us out? If they talk about those escapes that the British tried to do, the Great Escape, I think, is also
I
another
was
World
gonna
War
say
II
another
film that gets.
movie you have to cut
Yeah,
in
that's
to
right.
the to the master
That's right.
cut. Yep.
Um, if I'm not mistaken, is that the one that they reference in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Is that the film that they insert Leo into?
Oh, yes, and the guy from Band of Brothers is playing Steve McQueen, the star of Great Escape and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood too. So
Ah, see, look at
so
that.
it's really all
It's all one big universe, so you could pick and choose which scene you wanted to insert in there if you want if you want Leo or the main actor. Um,
true.
but yeah, I think it really, if they're the anchor of this show, and I think they are two actors that are young and at the height of all things, right? I think Butler still has some of that Elvis accent that he developed for that works for this, right? That
Yeah.
Wyoming Midwest kind of accent works for here, and
Mm.
for the flyboy nature too of it all. And yeah, I think they really anchor it really well done here. But like I said, once they are shot down, the show kind of shifts protagonists and focuses instead on the activities of Major Robert Rosie Rosenthal and Lieutenant Colonel Harry Crosby, the aforementioned gentleman who is a navigator that also has extreme air sickness that cannot keep anything up while he's in flight. So, what do their stories indicate about the changing attitudes and feelings towards the war that you picked up?
Uh sidebar, because I won't get another chance. I'll take the Elvis accent compared to whatever Barry Keoghan's doing. He's,
Oh
great
my gosh, yeah, and he's in this.
Irish accent, but not a great New York accent. He's trying so hard, but it's a mess.
I mean, like, yeah, that's a thing, like, right? Because like he's a big name actor, and
Yeah,
his plane goes down in episode 3. Maybe to showcase, like, hey, no one is safe in any of this. Like, no, there is no skill in war. It's just luck,
yeah,
right? Were you in the front?
yeah.
Were you in the back? Were you in the wrong place at the wrong time? Were you in the right place at the right time? His plane just went down.
It's
He
gone.
could land it, and then just didn't, and it blows up. And
Yeah,
yeah, when they
definitely thought, because I knew him from so many other things, I thought he was going to hang out and be a part of the show. I actually, at first, there's a way in which I actually think about the backstory of Saving Private Ryan, how famously they had the whole squad trained together and they didn't invite Matt Damon, so that there was that
Yep, yep.
natural alienation. And I think I was reading that into Rosie's arrival, right? That he is the next
Yeah,
wave of
yeah,
reinforcements. He's meant to be separate. And I think in his arrival episode, he kind of feels like he's a pencil pusher who's going to tell them how they've been doing it all wrong. And that fades away very quickly. And I actually found myself really interested in his story and really compelled by it, kind of on its own. But to your specific question, like and you alluded to this episode before. I think the episode where he's in the retreat and Crosby's at the conference in Oxford, right?
yes,
I think that's actually like really important to help us all understand that, it was a lot of day in day out missions, but then even in the middle of that, they started to diagnose the kind of what was called shell shock, and later had battle
yeah.
fatigue and other kind of
Combat
euphemisms.
fatigue,
What
yes,
combat fatigue, what we would now call PTSD. And like, I think it's important when we simplify those narratives to these men did incredible things and then they came home and realized they had problems. I think that does a disservice to the history and to the real
hmm
stories that happened. So I
exactly.
thought it was important that both of those got there. And then we see the heroism, although again, maybe you're just cramming down the feelings and that's the problem. But the heroism of returning and still being active and a part of it. And I want to make sure I get this right. It is Rosie who is one of the lawyers at Nuremberg, right? That's
Yes, yes.
crazy that he goes back, gets, I guess he had his law degree before because he went back to the same firm that he worked at before the war and
So
then
if I
meets his
understand
wife
correctly,
on
he
the
he
way.
never goes home. Uh,
Oh, okay.
I think he starts to maybe, and this is a Rosie thing where he never stops flying. I think he does like some 50 plus missions. I think he starts to train to fly B-29s to then go to the Pacific after
Wow.
after and then when the war ended, he stayed in, I think, Europe, and then was like, "Hey, I can do some lure help." And then the train ride down to Nuremberg was how he met his wife, who also worked for the trial.
And the documentary revealed he did not live that much longer, which made me very sad. I believe I have that right,
Rosie,
right?
he lives till 2007.
Oh, then it's the other one. That's Crosby. One of them died very
Crosby
quickly.
lives Crosby lives till the 90s. It's
So who died fast?
uh
Bucky.
Clevin and Egan both don't make it. Well, sorry, Clevin makes it to 2006, and then Egan
Okay.
is in the 60s. Yes,
Okay. So I'm a little off there. But it's a great story and a good reminder that like there's a lot of ways to fight for the cause, right? And I do think the inclusion of those extra characters who are still, well, Crosby's not really the hot shot type of stereotype, though he does incredible work. I loved the episode where he's planning all the missions and then conks out and
and
wakes
like,
up
dude, just take a
three
nap.
days. Yeah. But like 3 days after D-Day, he's like, I gotta get back. And they're like, man, it's over. Like we did it. And I thought again that that's a nice way to kind of highlight how many different people it took. The part of the Atkinson book I'm reading right now, they're just talking about like getting new shoes to the troops and like
It's
the
important.
number of shoes and how poor quality they were and that they didn't fit right. It's like it's unbelievable. Like the material behind every single person right on the front and the people making the plans and so on. So, yeah, very cool. And I was glad to have those perspectives.
War is very much about logistics more than anything, right?
Yeah.
Can you feed the army? Can you clothe them? Do they have the equipment and material needed to do the job, right? And it's something as simple as having shoes and winter clothing, right? The bow of the bulge. A lot of the guys don't even have winter clothes. Like I know, I know a lot of vets that were like, if I'd have seen Eisenhower, I would have rung him up because guy didn't give me a warm winter coat for all those months, and I had to deal with all
Yeah.
that. So like it all factors in, and I think that's the real interesting aspect of Crosby's inclusion in this, because he is the guy that's from the beginning to the end. So he's the narrator of the
Hmm.
series. So when you're like, oh, there's like this third person omniscient voice telling us about things as they're happening. Oh, that's you've come to find out, if you didn't find out early enough, but eventually you find out, okay, that's Crosby, definitely, or like
Yeah.
that's Crosby, and this guy that is just a navigator, right? He's telling them how to get from point A to point B. He's not firing the guns. He's not the bombardier pushing the button to release the bombs and all that stuff. He's very much like the pencil pusher guy. He
Yeah.
is the guy that should be at a desk and eventually gets to the desk role, and then plots the ways for guys to get from point A to point B, utilizing the least amount of fuel or the safest route or whatever they needed to meet the mission. And yeah, only I think there are only like maybe I could be certainly wrong here, but I think only 10 to 20% of the United States military during World War II actually saw combat. So that leaves
Yeah.
a very large majority that do not. And they're the people that are medics. They are the ones engineers. They're creating things, right? They're in ships that are transporting materiel back and forth. They're manning defense installations. All these important jobs that aren't necessarily the quote unquote glory. The combat always gets glorified, but it's really the people behind the scenes that are making the ships run on time, making the trains go efficiently, and making sure that the guys have what they need in order to complete the task at the end of all things. So I think it's really important that he's included to combat that hot shot, Top Gun, cool guy, pilot kind of persona that certainly Butler and Turner bring to this, and Rosie too, right? Rosie is that like almost the antithesis because of how much like all 50 plus missions that he has, and even he gets shot down too, right? But like that almost like inferior in a weird way, that it's inferior, not inferiority, but like soldier of fortune kind of thing, right? Where he unbeatable, unstoppable, can't be shot down.
Yeah.
He keeps going up and coming back. He's the only survivor. He'll keep doing it again. He can't say no to another mission, right? When he's at the retreat, he's like, I gotta get back. This is weird for me.
Mm.
I can't do this. I need to be back up in the plane again. So when the show shifts to the two of them, like that's the two ends of the spectrum, right? Where the guy can't get out of
Yeah.
the plane, and then there's the guy who can't get in the plane. and and that's the war in between there is
Yeah.
everybody else that fits those two spectrums there. So once the crew gets up and running, right, you have your Clevin and Egan, um, to get everything situated and give them the standards that they need in order to start the fight. And then after the minutia, like the catch 22 thing of like, oh well, they just keep giving us more missions. I can't get out of this thing.
Yeah.
Then that's the rosy side of things. Both of them ultimately have the same drive and passion to stop fascism.
Mm.
I think that's ultimately what, like Rosie especially, is like, I don't even care. Like, I know they're not doing good things to Jewish people. I don't know how much to what extent he knew at that time of that, but he certainly finds out once he crash lands. Um, he's like, it doesn't even matter. Like, if I can stop fascism and what Germany's doing one day sooner, then I've done my job. And to a certain degree, when the almost humorous scene sequence of Crosby, all those missions that he's planning out for in preparation for the D-Day invasion, right, is like that's him doing his effort for it. He's like, I know
Yeah.
my skill set and what I can do. If Rosie's the best pilot we've got up there, send him up there, and I'm gonna bust my bust everything I got to do as many missions, and I'll pass out literally for 3 days afterwards. I was, when I was watching it this next time, for prep for the show, I'm like, man, if he'd have just taken like an hour snooze, like, like all these pills that he's taken to prolong, like he would have just been so much more productive if he'd just taken like an hour here or there just to like not be at his desk or something like that. Like versus 3 days of losing him. I don't know. Maybe modern times would have suggested otherwise, but
you you
his
sound like
mental
me
fortitude.
talking You sound like me talking to first years in November. I'm like, look, I understand you have all this people. Just take a little nap. Stop pulling the all nighters. They're not as productive as you think they are,
That's
right?
right.
Take the hour away and build your strength up. But yeah, and again, the pills was an interesting part of that, in specifically because the doctor says what, no more than one a day or something, and he's like, yeah,
If
but
that. I think he's like no
it
more than one, right?
yeah, yeah, but then it's like that's another way we're on the frontier. Like these things are new, and we don't really know their
Yeah.
effects or
Yeah.
what they have. So it all kind of works as a part of that, and just the beauty of that scene where the guy's like, "Relax, you did it. Like it's 3 days ago, everything worked. We're there." Like kind of an
He's like, I missed it. He
incredible,
feels upset
yeah,
by it. He's
kind of
like, oh,
Yeah, gosh. Oh, it's Rip Van Winkle, right? Who sleeps through the American
Hmm.
Revolution and wakes up on the other side. Yeah, it kind of feels like one of those.
Well, another thing that they added into this show was the Tuskegee Airmen are included in this series. Towards the end, I will add to that, maybe an episode and a half, they're included in this, in the entirety of this. So, what do you make of their addition to Masters of the Air?
If I'm being completely honest, it felt
Go
like
ahead.
they thought there would be complaints if they did not include them, and
Okay.
so they kind of shoehorned them in a little bit. And
All right.
one of the
Good.
things that I think made me kind of conclude that is I really like Ncuti Gatwa, who plays the Doctor on Doctor Who.
Hmm.
Actually, I
Yeah.
believe he's retired, but I haven't watched the newest season. But and so when I watched the first opening credits, and again, I'm like, oh wow, they caught a lot of these actors. I see him in the main credits. I'm like, awesome! Like we're gonna get a lot of him. I love that actor. Like I can't wait. And then
Only
are
to
we
not.
like yeah? I guess he shows up in the last eighth of the credits, so he shows up in the last eighth of the show. But you know, I think it's important that we not forget the red tails, and I think even in this
Hmm.
kind of small abstracted way, we get a reminder when it's like, yeah, you don't have enough fuel, but they don't care about you. They don't care about us, right? And those stories matter and are an important part of this history. Um, I really I did enjoy Red Tails when I saw it. I only saw it the once. I don't own it. I have not revisited it. I should, but
You
it kind
should.
of felt like that was like, let's tell their story in a meaningful big way so that everybody remembers this.
Yes.
So this almost felt like an afterthought because it's like, well, we're not going to tell them. And I know there have been other Tuskegee Airmen movie. I watched one I think in high school, or at least pieces of one.
Lawrence Fishburne. Yep.
Yes, that one. So like they do have places where that story is told. And so I think it would have been okay to leave them out of this just because it's a whole different mission, it's a whole different group. It's so outside the focus we've been on. They do get that moment where they pass through the same camp, and so you kind of get the like
And
glance
that's it,
across the
right?
crowd. And so it really just felt like separate and shoehorned in. And I hope it's clear to listeners that that's no disrespect to the Tuskegee Airmen. It's like they just, the story is so good they it deserves the full treatment, not the kind of, oh, and these guys were also here treatment.
No, I 100% agree with you there, and my I agree with the same complaint. Like, I'm like, why include them if they're just gonna be here at the end? Why are you introducing a new character, a set of characters too, that I've created this bond with these other guys for these 7 plus episodes at this point, 7 hours, and then now
Yeah.
you're diverting me here? It's just kind of a jarring shock in a way of like, "Oh, where's the guys that I know?" I'm like, "I wasn't expecting this." Um, if they had maybe just, like, in, like, episode 4, 3, whatever time frame, just, like, start introducing them in a couple of scenes here and there,
Yeah.
would have been much more beneficial because their story just doesn't start in episode 8 in 1944, 45-ish whenever that episode takes place. Um, like, they've been there
Yeah.
for a year plus at that point too, almost the same time as the, the 100th Billy 100th group. So, like, they could have easily have told their stories a lot more too in these episodes, and that's just like, "Oh, well," it does feel a little bit like, "Well, we might as well include them, guys, and, like, pat ourselves
Yeah.
on the back for doing so," and I'm like, "Well, I would almost rather you not include them because it feels like you're diluting a very important story to, African American history and just, American history in general, especially when it comes to World War II, um, that if you're not going to give it the time and diligence that it needs to flesh out those things, right? The vast amounts of racism that they experience, the no, the inferior planes and material that they had for a long time. Um, just if you're not going to tackle all that and do it to the nth degree that I think is deservedly of that, then don't include them.
Yeah.
So it's almost a little jarring, but I do hear your point there too, where it's like maybe this is the first and only time someone gets exposed to the air
Yeah.
war. Maybe they're just like, "Oh, I'll put on this, I like Austin Butler. I'll watch this show with him," kind of deal. And if this is their entryway into the Tuskegee Airmen and want to go follow those stories, further, then so be it. But like our Red Tails discussion a few weeks ago, we still think that there's a lot more to say about the Tuskegee
Yeah.
Airmen that like there hasn't been the definitive. This isn't the D-Day, right? Where like no one's touching that because it's been done so well. Even with Red Tails and the Tuskegee Airmen film that I think HBO did in the mid '90s, the Lawrence Fishburne one that we discussed little couple seconds ago, there still is not that. Okay, this is it. This is
Yeah.
the Tuskegee Airmen show. If you want to, it's taught in all the high schools now. if you if you want to see the Tuskegee Airmen and everything that they did during the war, this is what you should watch. And I don't think we've hit that yet, and
Mm,
it's upsetting, but maybe we'll get there one day. So hopefully it opens the door of curiosity for someone that maybe 20, 30 years, I hope not that long down the line, gets the bug to say, hey, let's do that. Um,
yeah.
it also stems into the Lucas thing of it all too. When he was making Red Tails, that it was like no one in Hollywood wanted to finance this,
Yeah.
so he had to do it himself. And it's like, is that still the thing? And maybe that's like all they could get from Apple was like, hey, let's do this for an episode. And they're like, sure, we'll sign off on it. I don't know. There's still lots of systematic institutional racism across that industry that follows up to this point here. So maybe one day we get more stories of the heroic
Yeah.
minority
Hopefully.
groups that served across all theaters in World War II.
Yeah.
So, from a production standpoint, this series might be one of the most ambitious from Spielberg's career. Right? We talked about the big budget that it got and the streaming service. Um, and ILM did the work for this. So that's
Mm.
the Lucasfilm adjacent aspect of why we're talking about this on this Star Wars focused podcast. But how do you think that ILM and the other visual effects companies uh, that worked on this picture lived up to the tall task of bringing the air war to life?
Flawlessly. I mean, I never, it's a boring answer, but it's the truth is I
Hey, I'll
believed
take
this
it.
all the time. And, it never looked like green screen. It never looked, really fake. I guess there were maybe a couple times where I think they edited the sky to give it different weather or like a really
Mhm.
fancy sunset or something. But like the actual air combat was flawless. And I was thinking last year I spent a lot of time with the Phantom Menace, and I was thinking about, when they are initially making the pod race, they talk about this in the documentary. They talk about like all the details of when you make a pod engine crash and how it's all about the movement and all
Mm,
the pieces breaking off. And then you jump 25 years ahead and they're doing this level of detail that yes, it's planes blowing up, it's explosions, but like I see every bit of that plane. It's like the whole plane is actually constructed and then it falls apart and blows apart in these specific
yeah.
ways. You can break off this piece, you can put a hole in that. I was just kind of astounded at the level of detail they managed. And you alluded to in your Red Tails episode the initial cut of Star Wars with the dogfight footage cut in. It's like this is what George Lucas always wanted, right? Like this is
This
the
is
this
his
is the
dream.
dream. Yeah, and you get it there, and the beautiful shots of you actually stay in the plane more than I expected. I think that's something that
Oh.
separates it from Star Wars, which would follow the squadrons and kind of do something a little differently in that style.
Mhm.
But I think it helps reinforce. It probably also makes the effects more affordable, right? It's easy to have something blow by you than to
Maybe.
do some other things. So but I really never doubted what I was watching, and that is the highest
Mm,
compliment I can give it, is that it never took me out of it. I thought it was incredibly well done. And you said cinematic earlier, and it is like I could see this in the theater easily. It wouldn't stand out. And we're
yeah,
still not all that far. I just said how much I like Doctor Who. Like bad special effects are a hallmark of Doctor Who. Bad
it's true.
CG, and we're not that far. A TV budget. This is not a TV budget, but it is something that kind of transcends television. So
Well, I mean, you're right, it's not a TV budget, but it's for 9 episodes, right? 9
yeah,
hours where it's
yeah,
largely in the sky. A $250 million budget is like if you're talking like what did we get per episode? The math on it is like what 30, 40 million per episode.
yeah,
I mean, it's kind of crazy. You think like, oh, well, a 2-hour movie usually gets like a $200 million production budget. That's 2 hours
yeah, yeah,
versus 9 spread out, and you're paying these big name actors to be a part of the series. And I don't know how much they're all taking. Do they take a pay cut to be a part of this and to work with Spielberg and Hanks for this matter? I don't know. But I gotta imagine like a big ensemble cast, it adds up. And the fact that there's so much visual effects production required for this film, not this film, it is a large film basically, but for this series is an astronomic level of work that they did to make it look this good. Like there's only a few instances where I'm like, yeah, okay, a little cheesy there. I think some like the
Yeah.
when the bombs drop and whatnot and the destruction of like some cities from their perspective looks a little like, oh, I'm not really sure if I believe what I'm seeing on screen here. But for the most part, the things I need to believe are the planes and the planes destruction and or survival, bare survival at times, and how is the onslaught of aerial dogfighting, uh, or the attacks from, probably a better word to phrase it, are the attacks from German planes. Um, do those sequences look good, right? If a guy is shooting a 50 caliber machine gun out the window and he's seeing these planes scoot by, does that look like they're? If I'm looking from his point of view, does it actually look like there are planes going by, and
Mm.
or is it like this cheesy kind of like animation effect? And it's not. It really does capture the the horrific nature of the tension that is the air war, and how these planes would just sneak up on them, come out of the clouds in the sky, come out of the sun, and just wreak havoc on these poor defenseless planes that then would plummet 20,000 plus feet to
Yeah.
whatever doom was underneath them there. So ultimately, great job to ILM. I'm really surprised it did not get more recognition. Come
Mm.
like Emmys and other award seasons. Like I wonder what it didn't really get nominated, to be honest. Too. I don't know if it
Hmm.
just they spent all the money on budget and was like, forget you for your consideration
Got no
campaign.
campaign.
We're not doing that. But yeah, I'm really surprised about that. But to bring it to the Star Wars of it all, so they built
Mhm.
three. Um, 3 actual B-17s for the purpose of this. They used the actual schematics. For the production designer actually, like,
Wow.
physically built 3 new planes for this, and they utilized the same technology that they did for Solo, right, where they had the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon and then kind of
Oh
did the
yeah.
volume sequence around it where they're then reacting, and that was for a lot of the cockpit sequences of the show, was utilizing that same technology. So what they did with Solo then led to this. So if you're talking through lines of all this stuff, I mean, like, wow, who knew what the amazing stories that they'd be able to tell back then, when they're like, oh, now they can see hyperspace inside the cockpit of the Falcon, and we can get their reactions in live time, and now we can actually get pilots reacting in live time to historical stories that happened 80 years ago, and we're able to tell that in a really meaningful way, which I think is great.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, you have now seen Masters of the Air. Do you have the itch to further the story of the Hank Spielberg World War II relationship to now go to the Pacific and Band of Brothers?
Well, so just to make sure I age myself before we leave, I watched Band of Brothers on DVDs that the Netflix Corporation had mailed me. So I have
Oh,
been,
fantastic. I did not know that you actually had seen it. So that's my apologies
yes.
there.
So I've been all the way through Band of Brothers, and very much enjoyed it. Worth a revisit. I don't think you know, it's one of those DVD sets you actually see a lot in like used stores, right? So I've
Hmm.
definitely considered picking it up before, but I don't see it on my shelf here, so I think I've not given in. So I did really enjoy Band of Brothers. I was actually just approaching the Battle of the Bulge in the Atkinson book and was thinking a lot about that show, and
Yeah.
so the inspiration I get is I know I started the Pacific. So by the time the Pacific came out, I think my wife and I were in our apartment. I'm not sure we were married yet, and we had HBO. And so remember the advertisements. I remember being excited that was the kid from Jurassic Park reuniting with Spielberg, and I know I watched the first couple, but I'm pretty sure I didn't follow it on. And while I like all three of these shows, they are not fold your laundry shows. You have to be paying
Nope.
attention and keeping them straight. And I think honestly what happened is I got a couple episodes in and I got distracted, or maybe knowing me, I was probably trying to grade and watch something. So I got
Mm.
distracted and hadn't paid enough attention. And so kind of lost interest because I was too confused by what was going on in the Pacific. So I would like to return. I assume those are all on HBO Max, right? Because
They are
HBO
on the
paid
on the
good
Max.
money.
Yeah, they used to be on
Yeah.
Netflix for a hot second there, and now they're back on Max.
Okay. So I think I will go back and check out the Pacific. I was also feeling very nostalgic. This is a very weird shout out, but Lucas Arts, not Lucasfilm, did do a Secret Weapons Over Normandy video
Oh,
game that I
I have it.
played. Yeah, it's on Xbox, right? The first Xbox, was it?
It
Yeah.
is. It's on Xbox. Yeah, and if you have an Xbox now, which I do, they have the digital copy available on their store. So
Ah,
I have it in
nice.
perpetuity, hopefully for now on.
Nice. Yeah. I that's another, like, I got it in a bargain bin. I was like, "Oh, I'll pay 10
Oh,
bucks
it was
to do
so
this."
good.
And as I recall, it was like good old-fashioned X-Wing and TIE fighter flight simulator stuff, but you get to actually fight over Normandy. So that was where I was like, I think I might pull out, see if I can find that video game. I'm sure I still have it because I don't tend to sell video games, which is silly of me. But so I might dig it out and see if
No,
I can play
just
that
don't sell them
or
because
get
they
the
keep going
digital
up in
copy.
value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I love Secret Weapons over Normandy. That is such a good game, and Michael Giacchino did the score for it.
Oh,
Fun
cool.
fact. So if you
Yeah.
revisit it, just like, oh, hey, that guy went on to do some interesting things over time. And if you ever get a chance to talk to David Collins, who does a lot of Skywalker Sound stuff these days, and does a lot of like the celebration things, like I chatted with him on what's now called X, formerly Twitter, uh, a couple months ago, and he was thrilled to chat about Secret Weapons over Normandy because he worked on
Yeah,
that
that's
as an intern.
his era.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, he was like, "Wow, people want to talk about this still?" I was like, "I do, I do." That game was great. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. And I hope you get the chance to dive back into both of those properties after revisiting this, so that you get the full trilogy, if you will.
Mm.
And that darker middle chapter, right? That very much the Pacific fits that bill of the
Yeah,
three of them there.
nice.
So I think it's a nice through line there. And I actually do have this hope that maybe Apple in like maybe 5 to 10 years will give them another 250 million and they'll do the Navy
Mm.
side of things too. I feel like that's the
Yeah,
outlying story there that could be told of going back to the Pacific and telling an actual story on the water, that the sailors and Marines of that
good
experience
idea.
also went through, which I think would be very interesting because, very much they're vastly different experiences of the tragedies of war, right? Jumping out of an airplane in one to who knows what, landing on some unknown island in the Pacific that's 100
Yeah.
plus degrees every day, and whatever horrors that we're experiencing on this island. Um, and then up 25,000 feet in the sky and trying to make it through in this aluminum piece of junk. Um, and then what's next after that is the Navy. So who knows what could come of that and the stories it could tell. That
And
Indianapolis
Spielberg,
story that Spielberg wants
that's
to do is right
exactly
there.
what I was gonna say. Spielberg could do the Indianapolis. That would be really cool if he, got to direct that so many 50 years later. I don't even have to say so many. It's quite obvious how
That's
many.
right.
So,
Turn it into
yeah.
yeah, add some guy in the background named Quint and
Oh, brilliant.
really brilliant, just like subtle foreshadowing there for that. That'd be so cool. But yeah, I
Uh,
hope you get to do that, and I'm
yeah.
sure it'll hit different now that 80 years have gone
Yeah.
by, as well as like you have Masters in the Air under your belt. So that's gonna change how you look at those every time you're like, oh, there's a plane up in the sky. Um,
Mm.
that'll be an awesome experience for sure.
Well, and
And
and,
Greg,
and
that
I alluded to, I haven't listened to your Saving Private Ryan episode because I want to rewatch the film first, and
oh
that's the one
yeah,
I'm really excited to return to because it did hold such a special place to me when it came out and felt so powerful, and I'm excited to see. I expect it has aged quite well. There's nothing I can recall about that seemed frivolous or silly. So that's what you most inspired me to do. So I'll get that done this weekend and
ah,
check out that episode last week.
it is a good one. It is a good one. I'm excited to hear what you think about it. And Greg, that is all the questions I had for this. Do you have anything else that you want to note about Mash of the Air? I mean, 9 whole episodes. There's so much in this thing. Do you have any like other bits or moments that you're like, I want to bring this up for the record?
You admonished me when I started the project. You said absolutely never hit the skip intro button. I want to
Yes.
co-sign that
Oh.
advice.
Ho, ho.
It's a great score, particularly over the opening credits, and just really nice glamour shots. And I actually don't remember the music standing out that often in the actual episodes. I think they let the sound effects do a lot of the work during
Mhm.
key sequences, but it is, it's just gorgeous, and ending with the sunset golden hour shot over the plains. It's
Oh,
like it's
it's
perfect
so
stuff. So
good.
so co-signing that recommendation to the listeners.
That was gonna be my note here, because never hit that skip intro button, folks, when you're watching Masters of the Air. Blake Neely didn't have to go this hard with that intro score, but it's called SOAR for a reason, and it does. It is
Yeah.
like, and it's interesting because this is a different, so like Band of Brothers and the Pacific are also known for their like intro themes. But when they had veterans still alive, they interviewed them and would have them do like a intro for the episode before they even went into it, and then they would have the theme music, and then the whole episode would play out. And then
Mm.
this is interesting, in where they changed that, didn't include the veteran experiences at all until the documentary that also accompanies it, which I hope people also get to check out as well, Bloody Hundredth on Apple. They do like cold opens, and then they they and some of those cold opens are like 15-20 minutes, and like, where's the
Yeah.
theme music? Let's get to this, guys. uh and it never disappoints when you start
No.
hearing those trumpets soaring and all that. Like, man, we're kicking. This is gonna be great, and it's excellent. I have the vinyl for that sole purpose alone.
Oh, nice.
um,
Nice.
so, Greg, that is all that I had for Masters of the Air. Where can the folks find you and all the podcasts that you do? Long Take Review, Behind the Glass Columns, all the great stuff. Rebel Base Card. You got a lot on your plate there, and
Yeah.
an appearance on Who's the Boss. You've been all over the place with your podcast of late. So, where can the folks find you if they want to continue the conversation?
Yeah, that was a pretty good list. I would particularly recommend if you were listening to this because you're interested in World War II and representation on film. We have a great long take review episode coming on this week, which is, I'm saying that hesitantly because I'm not the one who edits them, but I believe Jen will have it out Friday, which is Casablanca. So as you listen to me here, it should have come out a couple days ago, but a really fun discussion about Casablanca with a guest named Ross Hollaban, who's a complete stranger to this program.
Never heard of him before.
But this is continuing. This is the third entry in our series, which we'll get to Anthony eventually too, of a guest coming on and just picking a favorite movie. And this was Ross's pick, and so it was a good excuse to go back and experience an absolutely
It's a
incredible
great one.
film. And then we are also continuing our journey on Second Breakfast, which is the series on Rebel Base Card, where we are returning to Andor and going episode by episode. So we just talked last night about Sagrona Tima, which is episode 2 of season 2. And we had a great conversation with Craig from Reading Between the Reels, which is another
Hmm.
I don't know if he's been on this show, but he's in the
He
orbit of
has.
all of our shows. So really great to get to know him a little bit and just stare
You're
at the
telling me
action
you didn't have
figures.
3 Gregs, on the show? Oh,
Greg,
Greg and
and
Craig,
Craig. Yeah.
Greg, right?
It
That
came
must have
up a
been
few
quite a.
times. Yeah. Where somebody, people, I think you and Dan Z have both booked Greg and I together and
Mhm.
then immediately regretted it because it gets too confusing. And here Greg booked a Craig. And so he would ask a question and I would kind of make Zoom eye contact with Craig, being like, yeah, I couldn't tell which one of us it was either. So very, very funny, but a good conversation about Sagrona Tima. And I hope we can get you on over there. Although Greg dropped the news on me last night that you have already recorded a D23 Insight episode
I
with
did.
him, and that
I
will be
did,
on his
yeah.
feed very soon. So I think if your appearance on Second Breakfast is delayed, it's because you're appearing already on that feed at one time. So, but yeah, and I get around. I think I have a couple good episodes on Podcast Stardust that came out recently, and Who's the Boss. And I think I'm going back to Podcast Stardust next week to talk about the Bad Batch novel that just came out. So
Oh,
I need a
alright.
nap. I'm gonna fall asleep for 3 days and miss all of D-Day. But it's fun and as always, thank you. You are my favorite homework assigner because you think of
Ah,
good
love it.
homework to give me and things I've enjoyed. Your track record is flawless thus far, mainly because I dodged your Snyder cut of Rebel Moon question at some point. No, I'm willing to try anything. So, but yeah, and not to be too cheesy or maudlin, but it is meaningful that we don't let the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II pass. And I
Yeah.
admire that you found your own small way. I haven't seen a lot of, splashy podcast series about World War II films or, just the history of it this year. And it is kind of sad because it does feel like the first of the really major ones where obviously there are still World War II veterans alive, but they are few and far between these days. And
Less and
I
less with
feel
each day.
privileged. So, well, here I'll close with my favorite anecdote. So I had two grandfathers who fought in the war. One really didn't see combat, but my grandfather Cass, my dad's father, fought primarily in Italy, and then
Mhm.
he won a couple major awards, a Bronze Star, and for
Oh, wow.
combat related actions, which I don't understand all the details of, but have heard before. But one time, this just sums up the Greatest Generation. One time, we're sitting around like all having tea, and for whatever reason, the conversation turns to like, who's the most famous person you've ever seen? And like all the kids my generation are like, I've seen this band, I've seen that band. And my cousin's like, oh, I was at the airport recently and I saw Jimmy Carter across the terminal. And we're like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. And my grandfather like is just sitting listening to all of us. And he's like, well, I guess if you're asking, the most famous person I ever saw was Winston Churchill. It's like, what? And so when he was a part of the force in Italy, I think he was not the main landing force, but
Mhm.
Winston Churchill jumped in a boat and kind of cruised along all the landing craft to
Wow.
just throw up the V for victory and and get the it was like, yeah, grandpa, you win. You win. That's how it is. But it's incredible that I knew this little old man who would sit and drink tea and pretend he wasn't watching Days of Our Lives with his wife, but somehow knew what all the characters were doing. And they are the Greatest Generation. They changed world history with no hyperbole, period. And I think of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Like in the end,
Yeah.
we're just passing through history, but this
Mm.
is history. They
This
were
is history, yeah.
history. So yeah. So
The thing when you're watching Saving Private Ryan later, when Tom Hanks is like, "Earn it," right?
yeah.
And everyone like, there's a way to look at it, right? Where it's like, okay, he's telling this guy that we lost all these people for to like say like, "Hey, have a good life, figure this out, you know, make this worthwhile. Like live life to the
yeah.
best, be a good person." And all that, which is a lot to put on a guy that, he's probably 21 or
Tell me
so, and
here. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, tell me, and then, when it cuts back to the future, or at that time, right, to then be like, "Hey, wife, tell me I've been a good guy." Uh,
Please here.
make
You have to tell me. Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
but I always interpret that as like, think of it like the Spielberg perspective, right, where he's making this like as a love letter to his dad, basically, where it's like, earn this world that we've created for you all.
mm,
Earn the like,
yeah.
and then that's the question that I've had ever since I've seen this movie, which is like, have we earned it? Have we been good
Yeah.
stewards of a world free of fascism? I say that, and
Seems like we might need to be stepping up a
oh
little bit. Yeah. Yeah. It
yeah,
might be
and
our
like
turn.
it's a big daunting task, and we try not to have wars. We certainly have not had the level of wars and to the level of death that happened prior to that, but I do worry that the next one at that level of scale could be the last one
Yeah.
with the weapons and
Easily.
number of people that we have these days, right? A lot more billions of people on this planet now. It won't be pretty. So we certainly, as stewards of this planet and as of people and good people, should do absolutely everything we can, and that takes the effort of learning problematic history and not glossing
Yeah.
over it. Learning the signs, figuring out what are the steps that take us down those dark paths, and doing everything we can to avoid that. So that's partially the point of the series too, is like to get us to recognize some of those things and to focus on that. And I think Andor, not to bring it back to Star Wars, but I will, does that as well too. And having all these
Yeah.
stories out in this day and age is a very important thing, and it keeps that conversation going, which I'm glad is still a thing. And new films keep coming out every year, right? We get an Oppenheimer that really circulates that conversation
hmm
back up to the forefront again. I'm excited that Nuremberg film with looks like Russell Crowe as
Yeah.
Herman Goering comes out later this year, and Rami Malek, and that, I think that'll ignite some interesting conversation too.
It's
Zone
got a
of
little
Interest as well
festival buzz.
recently.
Yeah.
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 So, when all these films come out and they get top buzz and they're good and have really lasting impacts, then it creates a conversation that I think can only transcend art and make it a lot more of a larger discussion than just, okay, that was a good 2 hours and now I turn my brain off, which is also fine, medium as well, for this type of for many stories out there. But for a lot of these stories too, it deserves the grace and diligence to understand the who, what, where, when, how, and why.
Well said.
Well, folks, and thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I hope you listened to the entirety of this series. It was a lot of fun and to bring these stories to you all and to have these great chats with both Greg and Ashley from Destination World War II. So I hope you go check out these films and hope that you caught the bug to learn about more about the Second World War and its lasting impacts as well as the influences that led up to it, because there's a whole 20 years after World War One that arguably are the precursor to World War Two, and it's all right there for you. So please go explore. There's tons of resources out there. If you want to learn more about Masters of the Air, there's a book that inspired it by Donald L.
Mm.
Miller. So you can go check out that. It's like 700 pages, and I'm excited to dive into it. Crosby also wrote his own book too. I believe Alexander Jefferson, who's one of the Tuskegee Airmen that are showcased in this story, also wrote his own book. So go check out those primary sources.
I probably could have bought it. It was
He
probably him.
might have.
Damn,
He might
dang
have
it!
been
If
the
I
guy
had the
there.
courage, yeah.
um, you know, so go check out those things. Go explore more things about the Second World War. Just literally go to Amazon or go to your local bookstore, or any bookstore, used bookstore or something like that, and just go to there's going to be a military history section. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different World War II titles for you to pick up, and you can't really go wrong, to be honest. Pick one up, dive into it, find what interests you, and keep learning, keep the conversation going, and be a good steward of this world that we've earned 80 years later. So just for programming, folks, we are switching back to Star Wars next week. So get ready for that. Looking at the whiteboard, we have the aforementioned Greg McLaughlin coming back to the show
Oof.
to chat about that new Lego Star Wars Rebuild the
Oh,
Galaxy Pieces of
nice.
the Past. So we're gonna be tackling that. So getting back into the Star Wars fray of everything here. So I hope you enjoyed this little mini season here. But rest assured, our bread and butter still is Star Wars, and we will be having many weeks ahead of Star Wars content coming your way. And until then, folks, may the Force be with you. Take care.